Hey guys, welcome to the Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place I am giving you permission to not have it all together. Today's guest is Keagan Hayden, wife, mom of two, Bible teacher, author, and someone who knows all about wrestling with perfectionism in motherhood. She's also fresh off earning her master's degree in Christian leadership, all while raising babies and launching a new career. Talk about wearing many hats. In this episode, Keagan opens up about her journey of learning to let go of control and the unrealistic expectations she placed on herself and on her children. We talk about parenting in a world full of pressure, how perfectionism can feel like a badge of honor until it becomes a burden, and the beauty of raising your kids while you're still growing too. You'll hear us unpack everything from mom guilt and the need for grace to how our obedience should come from love, not performance. Keagan shares a powerful reminder. Your only job is to keep your eyes on Jesus. He'll take care of the rest. This is a conversation full of honesty, wisdom, and the kind of encouragement we all need in the messy middle of motherhood. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the show. Today, my guest is Keagan Hayden, and we've been chatting off camera a little bit. Keagan, you just finished your master's in Christian leadership. What a commitment, and kudos to you for doing that because you're a mom. That had to have been time-consuming and difficult to do as a wife, as a mom.
It was. I just had a lot of help. I had wanted to do it for a really long time, and the Lord opened up a lot of doors for me, and my husband is a coach, and in the middle of my master's degree, I started a whole new career and gave up everything I knew. So needless to say, I needed a lot of help, and I certainly did not do it alone. I spent late nights and some extended weekends with my kids at grandparents' house so I could accomplish some things, but it was not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. I only almost had a mental breakdown twice, and that was towards the end of the degree. I think that's pretty good progress.
That's a win. That's a win. I'm so glad that you're joining us on the show. This season is Help. I'm a mom who, and if I asked you to fill in that blank, what would you say, Keagan?
Ultimately, I would say I am a mom who has had to grow up with my kids. I think a lot of times we forget that we are raising babies, but ultimately, we are also being raised up into the parents that we are supposed to be. We are not just magically the parents that we're going to be when we have babies. And I have had to learn that. My oldest is 6. So over the last 6 years, I've had to learn what that looks like.
There's definitely no magic pill that you take when you deliver a baby. It's not like somebody hands you the baby and says, here's the baby, here's the handbook, and here's the magic pill that you're going to take, and you're going to do it all right, and you're going to do it all perfect.
That's so true. I have always told people, especially I used to be a teacher, so I tell my students who are now having babies, hey, this is awesome. And it's also terrifying because you go to the hospital, your life is normal, you have a baby, and they hand it to you and say, good luck to you. And you're supposed to keep this thing alive that you have no training in. So let's see what happens. And that's how I felt. That's how I felt.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have a 6-year-old. Do you have other children as well?
Yes, I have a 4-year-old boy, and my 6-year-old is a girl. She's our oldest.
Okay. Okay. So you've got one of each, which of course
Yes.
then it all changes when you have a different sex as well. Totally
It
different.
it absolutely does. I thought when they were babies that it wouldn't be that different because how can babies be that different? But it was a wild ride having a boy and being like, "How are you? Like, you are sleeping, eating, and I'm changing your diapers. How are you so different?" And
Mm,
from the very beginning, they have been totally different kiddos.
yeah. What's the number one thing that you think you have struggled with the most in motherhood?
Control. I am very type A. I really want to be in control. And so when I'm not, I try to do that. And a lot of times it looks like me getting frustrated or getting angry. And so I have to remind myself that my little people are learning how to be humans, but I'm also learning how to be a human. And so I've really struggled with shouldn't I have it figured out? Like, I'm the adult in the situation and
Mhm.
I have it figured out. But ultimately, I do not. I don't have it figured out at all. And we're just learning together. And yeah, I'm the adult and I have a little bit more experience to help keep them alive. But ultimately, we're just learning how I'm learning how to be a mom. They're learning how to be kids. And it's an adventure.
Mhm. Did you in that control, do you find that you're controlling because you feel like you want things to be perfect? I don't wanna mess this up. You mentioned that you're type A. I can totally relate. And so before I pressed record, we were talking about doing things. You also have a podcast and how sometimes with personalities similar to ours, we don't even wanna start if we can't do it perfect. And then God blesses us with children, and so now we've started and maybe we're like, "Wow, I thought this was gonna be easier than this to do it all the right way." Do you feel like that's the perfectionism is some of why you're trying to control it because you want it to be perfect, you don't wanna mess it up?
100%. I think that for me, when when I am raising babies, I want them to be good humans. I want them to be kind. I want them to know Jesus. I want them to represent our family well when we are out in public at church, at football games, basketball games, because my husband's a coach. I want to have them wear our names well. And so, therefore, I put a lot of pressure on them. And then I also put a lot of pressure on me because ultimately, what they do reflects on me. However, I have spent a lot of time learning that perfect doesn't look how we think it should. It doesn't look like ultimately the kids are going to come in, they're going to sit down, they're going to look straight ahead, and they're not going to be loud, they're not going to be noisy. We're not going to have dirt all over our clothes. Our house is going to be clean. There won't be stains. That's not the way it goes. Perfect looks like honoring what God gave us. And it's messy, it's chaotic, it's stewarding things well, even if it is not 100% how we thought it was going to go. As long as it points our babies towards Jesus, points others towards Jesus, and honors him well, then ultimately we're hitting the mark.
Mhm. What made you realize this striving for perfectionism in motherhood is not gonna bode well in the long run for me or for my children?
I just really got burned out and I got where my daughter would start asking questions like, "Hey, I think I know the answer to this." And she would be really timid. And I wanted her to know that everything is safe. She can come to us about anything, and we're going to be here to help her and support her. We expect her to tell the truth so that we know how best to help her, not because there's going to be repercussions of trouble. Of course, there will be consequences, and of course, there will be discipline if it's needed, but there shouldn't be fear. And when she
Mhm.
started coming to me asking the questions that way, I was like, why does she feel the need to preface everything with this specific caveat? And
Mm.
then I was getting really burned out on trying to control things and I was exhausted all the time and I felt mean and I felt grouchy. And I was like, this is not the vision that I had for motherhood. I want it to be fun. I want them to remember how loved they were, not how
Yeah.
perfect they were expected to be. And
Mm.
I just remember, yes, I want my kids thinking, I want my kids to be kids. I want them to be free. I want them to know they are safe. And that's not going to come if I keep saying to them, hey, you didn't measure up in this way. Hey, we don't do it that way. Hey, this isn't working. Hey, becoming ultimately really legalistic and striving to measure up to people's appearances and expectations of what we should be when
Mhm.
the fact of the matter is the only person we should be striving to please is Jesus.
Yeah. You mentioned in the questions beforehand that you used to wear the title of perfectionist like a badge of honor.
I did.
Yeah.
I was good at things. I could do them well the first time. I made straight A's. I finished my master's degree with straight A's because I'm still recovering from this perfectionist label, right? But ultimately, I've had to learn that perfectionism is not a badge of honor. It's a very heavy burden to carry because Jesus, if we could maintain perfection, why would Jesus have had to go to the cross?
Yeah.
And if that is the standard that I am holding for myself, what am I ultimately saying about the sacrifice that
Mm,
Jesus made? And
right.
so I had to give up me trying to earn my way into heaven, knowing, hey, I can't earn my way, but maybe if I do all these good things, I'll be a really good Christian, or I'll be a really good mom, or I'll be a really good Bible teacher or leader, or whatever the case may be. And so I had to learn to let go of that and ultimately learn that I'm not going to measure up in all the ways everybody expects me to, but I am going to do things well because when I steward my gifts well, when I steward my kids well, then ultimately I am honoring Jesus. And that's ultimately my goal. But I also don't want to figure out in the end that I did all the work and I was so tired and I didn't honor the Lord well. My obedience was not based out of love for Him. And that's not something that I instilled in my kids. Instead, my obedience was based out of, can I be good enough? What are other people going to think? And then that's how my kids view their relationship with Jesus. And that doesn't serve me well. It doesn't serve them well. And it doesn't serve anybody else well, because how can we then share the gospel when we're striving so hard and we're saying, hey, Jesus isn't asking anything of you. He wants your heart. And we work out of that. We work out of our relationship with Him. And instead, we're acting like, oh, we earn our relationship with Him. That's completely backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Very contradictory of what you're trying to share with somebody, but what you're actually living. Where do you think your desire for perfectionism came from, or was it outside sources that you felt expected this of you?
I don't know if I knew where it came from, if I still know where it comes from, except for I remember I really love the compliments of, oh, she's a good kid. Oh, she knows that really well. Oh, she's really good at this. I love that affirmation. I love being the best, which sounds really conceited. And even my love language is not words of affirmation. So it's weird.
Mm.
I I do love to be good. I love to have this standard of excellence. And so I don't know ultimately where that came from, because my parents always said, just do the best you can. If that's a C on your report card, as long as you're doing the best you can, we're good with that. And in church, like they were like, hey, like you're 10, you're going to act like a 10-year-old. You're 16, you're going to act like a 16-year-old. And so they parented me accordingly. But for me, I think had I had kids earlier, I would not have cared so much. But between the time I got married and the time I had kids, there was like this shift of, yes, I love excellence, but I began to care what other people thought. I have no idea where it came from, but one day it was like the switch just flipped. And so I don't know where that came from, but I think it was about, hey, this is my husband and now I'm a reflection of him and I only want good things for him. So I've had a little perfectionism in me growing up, but I don't know that it was as much until I was like, hey, I carry this name too, and it reflects on him, and I only want to honor him. And it's not because he said that, but I think I
Yeah.
decided that on my own.
Yeah. I think that's very real. And I don't think you're alone in that, in wanting to do it right, being respectful of the opportunity that you've been given to carry his name. And then you have the children, and really feeling like, I want to honor this. I want to honor this marriage. I want to honor this role of motherhood, but then somewhere along the line in honoring, we turn it into performance.
Mhm.
And so I don't think you're alone in that. I can totally identify with what you're saying. One of the things that you said though is you're starting to see that as you learn different, as you realize, you know what, perfectionism is not the goal here. You're learning alongside of your kids. Let's talk about that a little bit. As you teach your kids to become a good friend, you're learning how to be a better friend. As you teach your kids how to communicate, you're becoming a better communicator. Let's talk through that just a little bit.
I tell my parents and my in-laws all the time, I'm parenting in a very different world than you parented in. So ultimately, what we are doing is we're we can learn from the wisdom of others because there is sage advice that spans all time. But
Right.
what we cannot do is neglect, here are our struggles now. Here's how the world has changed. Because when I was growing up, technology was just coming alongside us. Right now, we have that as part of here is part of our parenting journey. We have to talk about technology. We have to talk about safety. We have to talk about all of these dangers that lurk, which is honestly probably the scariest part for me of parenting. And we're not quite there
Yeah.
yet. We're just starting to test the waters, but that's beside the point. So I have been learning that I am raising kids in a different world that I grew up in. And who I am now is different than who I was when I was a kid. And so I'm having to, when I talk to my kids about, here's our relationship with Jesus, and here's how that looks, and trying to do that in everyday life, sometimes I say things and I'm like, oh, I needed that reminder. Or, oh, my daughter said this to a friend, or did this to a friend, or my son did this to a friend. And that wasn't nice, but how often do I do that?
Mm.
Or when I'm teaching them, hey, I'm really tired, they're really tired, but that's not an excuse to let our emotions run wild. And we still have to boss our emotions around. And how often I find them on the receiving end of my emotions that haven't been bossed around when I'm tired at the end of a long day.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
just like, I think a lot of times I parent from a do as I say, not as I do point of view, when Jesus and I have really had to wrestle through, hey, you're the example. And it's very hypocritical for you to say, do as I say, not as I do. So you have to be willing to expose all of the junk for me to refine you, to make you pure and complete for heaven. And your job is to also model that for your kids who are coming behind you and saying, I know Jesus loves me even when this. I know that I need to be a good friend even when I'm tired because this is the example my mom or my dad set for me. And just even when we have to have a lot of grace when we're tired, like we have to understand, hey, you're tired, sweet girl, but that's not an excuse. Like we
Mhm.
still have this expectation. And I've learned to start saying, but I get it. Like I'm really tired right now too. So
Yeah.
my temper's a little short or I'm really tired right now too. So I just really want to go to bed. And I try to turn it into maybe a race to bed or something like that. But I've been learning how to not just expect them to know, but instead teach them just like I've had to be taught because they're learning how to be humans. I'm learning
Gross.
how to be a parent.
Have you seen a response in your children where you are now shifting and you're growing alongside them? Have you seen a little bit? Maybe you said your daughter was coming to you and asking questions, a little timid. Are you seeing a positive response in this shift in the way you are now mothering them?
I have been seeing a positive response. I am also learning when to know it's timidity out of fear or timidity because she's my sensitive and withdrawn kid. And she's my kid that is just so reserved. And so sometimes she comes to me really meek and unsure. And I'm learning how to decipher that instead of taking it so personally of I failed in making a safe place, because I've had to get very honest about, here's where I have failed. Here's where I have not measured up in being a safe place. But here's where I have also failed in recognizing, like, this is just part of who she is too.
Mhm.
Because there's a difference in the approach. But when she comes to me with questions now, it's, hey, I think I know the answer. I'm good either way, but what about this? I'm like, hey, that's great. Or she knows, hey, we can talk about it. And sometimes she's, no, I don't want to. And I'm like, hey, that's okay if you don't want to, but we are going to talk about this issue at some point. It doesn't have to be right now, because I want
Yeah.
you to know it's safe. And so if you're going to be emotional, if I recognize that she's really emotional, or maybe I'm really emotional at the situation, whether that's anger or tired or whatever, I'm like, hey, we're going to come back to this. And when we come back to it, we are able to have a lot better conversation, identify what's going on a little bit more clearly, and she recognizes there is safety in this. And I'm very much a, hey, let's take care of it. And so to pause and be able to say, hey, we can come back to this instead of pushing her buttons, that
Yeah.
has been super helpful.
Yeah. I think sometimes as moms, we feel like we have to have the answers or the
Mm.
solution right away. And I think it's a great reminder that a pause can do wonders, and a, hey, let's revisit this at a different time. And it gives you some space to pray about it. It gives you some space. Maybe you need some advice from another mom or from your husband or whatever it may be. And so the permission to pause is a great space to be in. And again, it's teaching your kids that we don't have to be reactionary to everything that's happening. We can pause and reflect versus react. What about mom guilt though, Keegan? Has that crept in for you? I didn't get it right, or I reacted. Have you faced any of that feeling of just not good enough?
100%. I There was a stage where my daughter, she was probably 4, and in the beginning of her turning 5. My son is a little bit easier because my daughter acts just exactly like me. She's a little bit more timid than I am, so it's really hard to parent the you out of yourself or out of
Oh,
your kids. But my son is my husband, and so I am a little quicker to extend him grace,
mhm.
because I don't mean that to sound like there's favorites, but I extend my husband more grace than I extend myself. And so when I look at him and I see parts of my husband, I'm like, okay, here's the deal, friend. Whereas with my daughter, I see me and I'm like, okay, we have to get this right. But what I am learning and seeing is that when I don't get it right, I can sit in mom guilt, or I can go to my kids and I can say, hey, I messed up and I'm not going to get it right all the time. And just like you're learning XYZ, I'm also learning this right now too. And I just, I shouldn't have reacted that way. Here's why I did it. That doesn't make it okay, but it helps to understand where people are coming from. And so I just model like
Mhm.
this. Here's this apology, and let's help them understand maybe why people are responding the way they are, not because it's an excuse, but because it provides some insight and helps us to extend grace. And
Yeah.
so we talk through that. In our house, we're very quick to apologize. And I think that has helped mom guilt for me. Not that it gets rid of it completely, but
Yeah.
because I can say to her, Karen, I messed up and I'm sorry. Or I
Mhm.
can say to my son, I messed up and I'm sorry. And
Yeah.
it's been really freeing. And they can also say, I messed up and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And we're also teaching them that it's okay to say, that's not okay, but I do forgive you. Because that's something I grew up thinking I always had to say, it's okay, when really it wasn't. But what else are you supposed to say? So we are we're teaching them, hey, if you feel like it's not okay, you can say, I appreciate your apology. And they
Right.
are they're starting to do that. I'm seeing with some friends, with some teachers. And so there's been some really beautiful things in that because we're learning to show them that, hey, we still need grace too. We still need forgiveness too. We haven't arrived. And I think that's valuable for them.
It really is. You said that your faith colors your worldview. How has God redefined success for you as a mom compared to what the world says is successful as a mom?
When we look at the world and we see motherhood, we see, hey, I'm staying at home sometimes, or sometimes it's the complete opposite of I have this big empire type business.
Mm.
I am at all my husband's events. I'm at all my kids' events. I'm at all of these things. I'm making so much money, or we're super comfortable. Or if I'm staying at home, I can at least handle the house and we have a clean house and we have all of this. And I have learned, especially as I have sat with other moms, those are all lies that somehow society has fed us
Mm.
and we have all bought into, but none of us measure up to. Like,
Right.
none of us.
Right.
None of us has, even if we stay at home all day with one kid or two kids, the house is never clean, the dishes are never done, the laundry's never done. And if we are having these big empires, then we're not showing up for our husband or our kids or whatever we're saying yes to. We have to say
Mhm.
no to something else instead. And for me, as I have two kids who are starting to get involved in sports and trying to learn their activities and figure out where they're at, as I've worked on my master's and changed careers, and my husband's been a coach, and all of those things, I have learned that success looks like being right where the Lord has placed you and stewarding that well. It doesn't even necessarily look like what we thought it was going to 5 years ago or even 5 minutes ago. It looks like being where you are and being obedient to what the Lord has called you to. Sometimes that means that the house is a mess, but you're playing with your kids. Sometimes that means that you do have this big empire and you are setting boundaries of, hey, here is my time that is protected because my kids are out of school, my husband is home, this is our family time. Or it looks like maybe we're at home and we're doing the laundry and we might not have a whole lot of disposable income, but the fact of the matter is, what we do have is children who love Jesus, and
Mm.
we have a home that honors the Lord. And so for me, success, I'm very driven, I'm very ambitious. I like the gold star, I like the accolades because I want to know I can do it. But for me, two of the most refining positions that the Lord has ever given me have been wife and mom. And it seems each time I take on a new title that requires much of me, like wife and mom, I see one, a more tangible picture of the gospel. That's been true for me. That's not necessarily true. If I was single, Jesus would make the gospel very tangible to me. But for me, being a wife and a mom has made the gospel the most tangible that I can see it. It's made grace tangible. And it has been the hardest and best thing that I have ever done, just building on top of each other. And so success for me now looks like being where I am and honoring what God has asked me to do for that moment. And if it changes in 5 minutes, okay, we'll go with that.
Yeah. That's really great advice. I think often as a mom, we have put maybe dreams on hold, whether we are a stay at home mom or we're a working mom. I think most of us have dreams. Most of us have other things that we envision for our lives, or maybe
Mhm.
it's what we envision for our children. And we put things on hold, but we still keep our eyes focused on that. And so we sit in a current season, but always with a striving spirit that will cause us to miss the season that we're in. And so I think that what you just said is so powerful in that be okay in the season that you're in, even if it doesn't necessarily look like the season you want right now, because you're going to miss it. And eventually you're going to be in the season that you've prayed about or that you've dreamed about. And you're going to wish you were back in the season that you missed while you were striving behind the scenes for the coming season. Like, God's timing is perfect, and it all unfolds itself just as it's supposed to. And you don't want to miss where he has you right now. You wrote a book. I want you to share a little bit about your book. I love the title, The Struggle is Real. Will you tell the listeners a little bit about your book?
So I wrote a book because I had a friend look at me shortly after we had gotten married. And so we just celebrated our 12th anniversary. So this was like 10 years ago. My friend looks at me and she goes, "Hey, you should write a book." And I laughed. I laughed in her face. And I was like, what would I even say? Because I love English. I was an English teacher, but I am not so much a writer as I am a speaker. And so when she said write a book, I was like, well, what do I even write about? Who's going to read a book that I wrote? And I just couldn't let it go for several weeks. And so I looked at my husband and I was like, what would I even write a book about? And he goes, I love my husband to death, but sometimes he is super unhelpful in the ways that are most God honoring, because he looked at me and he said, "That's between you and the Lord. I can't tell you that." And I was like, that's no help. But really what he was doing is pushing me towards Jesus, which is actually the most helpful. So that was an adventure that me and the Lord went on. But we just started going through this series of not anything huge, not life altering, but it just was life piling up. We found a nodule on my thyroid that was potentially cancerous. We found a cancer spot on my dad it was a skin cancer spot. We were in the middle of moving. We were in the middle of a season where we were trying to figure out, are we going to be able to have kids? Are we not going to be able to have kids? What does that look like? We were figuring out our place in the world, and it was just life happening how it does, because that's what happens. And I just got to thinking, man, the phrase I used over and over was, the struggle is real. Can't win them all, but we're in the middle of this struggle all the time. And I kept thinking about how I felt like I couldn't share, hey, this is really heavy for us, because it felt so heavy to me, but it wasn't devastating, right? It wasn't a huge cancer diagnosis. It was very treatable. We scraped some skin off. We removed a nodule and ended up not being cancerous. Like, it was not anything huge, but we carried it heavy. And I got to thinking how Jesus promised us difficulties. He promised that we would walk through suffering. And sometimes that just looks like life's piling up.
Yeah.
And we have to orient that correctly with the Lord. That we have to remember that we fight from a place of victory, not we fight to victory. We come from victory, because we know how the story ends.
Right.
We know that he has defeated sin and death. And if we are in Christ, we fight from a place of victory. And if we can go into struggle or suffering, no matter how big or small it is, then ultimately what we know is, one, this doesn't last forever, even if it feels like it. And two, we don't have to get caught in this cycle of, oh man, this is a trial that I'm facing, and I wonder what God's word has to say about this, and all of that, and searching for victory. We've already found victory. So we can look at the truth of God's word, and that colors our perspective of how we look at this trial. That does not mean it's going to be roses and rainbows, and it doesn't mean we're not going to experience deep valleys or doubt or anything like that. What it means is we know how the story ends, and we are allowed to feel all the things in between, but ultimately we get to know how the story ends and cling to that truth. It's a life raft. And so that's what I wrote a book about.
Yeah.
It was a book about how when life is hard, because it's life and we live in a broken and fallen world, this is what we know to be true. And that's what gets us to the other side.
Just yesterday, we woke up and I swear, Keegan, every time I turned around, it was something else. And I had an appointment with one of our animals. And literally from the moment I left my house to make the 30-minute drive to the vet, while I was in the vet's office, and then the minute the doctor walked in, I had to get off the phone. And then as soon as the doctor left, I got back on the phone. And it was 7 o'clock. So it went from 2:30 to 7 p.m. I was on the phone with one of the children, not one, I'm meaning like multiple children at different times, multiple tears, things that were happening, things that were breaking their heart, things that were really hard that they were facing, things that hurt their feelings, decisions that they had to make. And 7 o'clock last night, because my husband knew what was happening. He was also, we were playing ping pong with kids and emotions in difficult seasons and things like that. And we looked at each other at probably 7 o'clock and I was like, oh my gosh, we have been through the ringer today. And he was like, I know. Nothing major, nothing terribly traumatic, but just life. And like you said, the struggle is real. And yesterday was one of those days of, man, the struggle is real. And how do we face that and really put the struggles into perspective? And that was
Right.
like the first thing we had to do with everybody that we were talking to. We were like, okay, hold on. Let's really put this into perspective in the grand scheme of life. This is how you're feeling, but don't let those emotions rule your feeling, rule your faith. Don't let those emotions rule the decisions that you need to make. One of them was somebody had said something not nice. And I was like, hey, who did that even come from? And what kind of value do we put on that person's opinion in our lives? What does God say about you? And so I loved your title, and I've said that often as well. The struggle is real. And yesterday it was real in our home. And you know what? Today it's been fine.
Yep.
You get through it, and today it's been fine. And you can just thank God for that. Felt really big yesterday, but it feels lighter today. And every day that we get through it, it gets a little easier, and you're reminded of how God just walks alongside you, whether it's little struggles or big struggles. He's not, no, that one's not big enough for me to pay attention to. It's
Right.
not how he operates.
And I'm so thankful for that. So thankful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause sometimes I have a really good friend. I just interviewed her actually this week. Her episode aired, and she's a counselor, and she calls it big T trauma, which is these are life altering traumas that happen in her, and little T trauma. And a lot of times we don't give enough value to all the little T traumas because maybe we feel guilty that it wasn't that big of a deal or it wasn't that, but it can still feel really
Right.
heavy when we're going through it. And God's not, like I said just a second ago, He's not, man, that's not important. It's all important. What's really important is turning our eyes and fixing our eyes back on Jesus and saying, you came and you died for the big T traumas and the little T traumas that we face and the decisions that, like all of it. There was nothing that he wasn't like, this is why I'm doing this and this is why I'm here. So that we do have that lifeline. We do have that raft, as you called it, to turn to. At the end of every episode, I ask if there is something that you're praying for that we could join you in prayer. And do you have a verse that you could share with the listeners?
Right now, we're praying just for the Lord to put us exactly where He needs us, because we have been feeling this pull of, hey, maybe we're not quite in the right spot, maybe career wise, or maybe parenting wise, or even just the way we structure our family, our daily and weekly routines. And so we're just praying through right now, Lord, where do you have us? And we would really like to see a change in some of those areas, but the answer so far has been not yet, not yet,
Yeah.
not yet. And I'm not good at waiting. So Maybe that's what we need to be praying for, is for me to be a good waiter. But just if we would just be praying for our seasons and contentment in those seasons, and for us to be able to know what the next right step is. And I always, whenever somebody asks me what my favorite verse is, I'm like, I don't know. It changes all the time. And
Yeah.
one verse that has been really sitting with me lately is Isaiah 26:3, which says, "You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you." And the other night we had some really bad storms, and I taught my daughter this verse because we like to take little verses that she can memorize now and that are really relevant to her life. And I was explaining to her, okay, so what does this mean? You, who? Jesus, God, keeps us in perfect peace. There is no fear, there is no worry, there is no anxiety, whose mind is stayed on you. So whose mind is focused on you because he trusts in you. So our job is to focus on Jesus and trust what he says. He does the rest. And I have found my daughter saying that to herself when she's afraid. I'm like, your only job is to focus on Jesus. That's your only job. Focus on him, trust him. He's going to take care of the rest. And so when I was teaching that to her the other night in the middle of a storm, I was thinking, man, like that's a way that the Lord gave me in that moment to think about it that I had never really quite gotten all the way through. So that's something I've been holding on to lately is my job is to focus on Jesus. His job is to take care of everything else.
Yeah. Amen to that. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Courtney.
Of course. Thanks so much for listening to The Mom Show with Courtney Doyle. Remember to check the show notes for any links, books, or resources that are mentioned in each episode. We want to be sure this blesses other mothers, and in order to do this, if you're listening via podcast, be sure that you like and share. If you could write a review, that would be fantastic. It helps us get in front of other moms. If you're watching via YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. This way, you won't ever miss an episode. We want to make sure that we increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.